Hey, everybody, welcome back to No New Leaders. We're going to have a great discussion today about, of course, leadership. One of the things that we've been discussing throughout this podcast. Really interested in all of your feedback. So please subscribe to this podcast. Definitely come and tune in and ask questions. Join our conversation. That's certainly what we want. Um, Definitely my co-host Mazi Mutafa will be on in a second. Of course, this podcast is brought to you by Words, Beats, and Life. So thank you all for joining us today. We're gonna certainly have this conversation. It's gonna be starting really briefly. Just waiting for my co-host to step up, and there he is. There he is.
What's going on, Jake? My Wi-Fi is continuing to act funny, even though I'm not plugged into Wi-Fi. So you got to be prepared to lead the conversation. If I start to break up, feel free to interrupt me. We just had someone pop into the chat and say, "I'm a new leader, and what is this?" That would be Talib Robinson. So this is a conversation we have every single Sunday around issues related to leadership. And it's called No New Leaders for a couple reasons. The name is supposed to have a double meaning. One is to say get to know new leaders, but also to say that there are not necessarily new leaders, as opposed to people that are in management, people that are kind of thought leaders. And so, what does leadership mean today? And so, today's topic is actually around burnout and innovation. And so we want to have this conversation with Jay in particular for a couple of reasons. One, because each of us have been doing the things that we do for multiple decades now. And this question of burnout, like, I guess I wanted to begin not with an indictment of either one of us, but maybe to begin with, when you hear the words burnout, what are the things that come to your mind, Jay?
So generally, when I think of burnout in this context, I think about taking on more things than you can handle to the point where you are so stressed and so overwhelmed that you can't necessarily perform any of them well. And sometimes burnout leads to decreased physical and mental health. I agree with Talib Robinson that Mazi, it looks like you have lost a lot of weight, so obviously you are not burned out. You've been doing, you've been taking care of yourself. This is why people say, talk about the concept of self-care. And I think self-care, honestly, is not, just a bunch of, trips to the Caribbean. It's really caring for yourself, eating right, getting the right amount of sleep. For some reason in our culture, we seem to praise team no sleep. I've been staying up for hours and hours working. And that's actually not healthy and is going to lead to burnout, whether it's mental burnout, physical burnout, and poor job performance. So we have to manage, in order to avoid burnout, we have to manage the amount of things that we're juggling at once. We have to make time for leisure, for family, for relationships. And that's how you avoid, everything just kind of crashing down on you. And that's pretty much what I see burnout as.
You make some great points, Jay. Talib is chiming back in, and so is, I'm hoping I say this correctly because I have a name that's been messed up my whole life. Naquetta said, burnout is an unexplainable mental and physical exhaustion. And Talib said it also causes stress. I think one of the things that I agree with all the things that have been said so far. I think I would probably add to that. I was talking to somebody earlier today who was in a job interview, and the very first thing he said to me was, I run a company, we lost all of our funding. Oh, can you hear me, Jay?
Yep.
Oh, and we lost all of our funding. So I said, for future reference, when you go to a job interview, don't tell people you lost all your money. Tell them you're doing a pivot. You're reimagining your programming. And so I think part of what causes burnout is people not having vision for how to move forward. Thank you so much for the correction on the pronunciation. Naquita. Um, and I think that that's really key. Like, not just how do you feel, but where are you going? Do you are you still driven? Are you still motivated? You know, one of the things I wrote on Friday is that the way I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing is that when I woke up on Friday, Fridays feel like Mondays to me now. I love them both because on both days I have management meetings with members of my staff, and I love to talk to them. It's actually the two of the highlights of my week is engaging with them. So I feel like this is part of how I know I'm where I'm supposed to be, and I'm working with who I'm supposed to be working with. That I'm energized by work as opposed to feeling burdened or put upon by it. And I think that lots of people are in jobs that feel like a burden because they are, that they are not feeding their souls, that they are not invigorating their spirits, they are not challenging them to imagine ways to work differently. And I feel like that's one of the keys to promoting lasting change in your own life and in the work in the work you do. What do you think about that, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. You always hear guys, particularly like when they're giving their Hall of Fame speeches, they oftentimes say, "I've never worked a day in my life." And that's really how work should feel. You should do something that's fulfilling, not just something that you get a paycheck from, and don't necessarily think about what other people say you should be doing. You know what I mean? Like if you are into painting, you don't have to be a physician. Be a painter because you are going to feel more fulfilled doing what it is that you love and and even though it's going to be a major pay cut in most cases, you're going to feel more fulfilled doing that, and you're probably going to perform better at it. So yeah, I think definitely doing what you love to the point where you love work. One of my favorite Drake lines was, forget a vacay, I feel better at work. When you're like that, when you actually enjoy the work you're doing, um, that's when you've kind of reached that, like, a really good place. I hope Monzi's Wi-Fi is still working and he's not. We haven't lost him. While he is really a hard worker, his Wi-Fi somehow does not work very hard. His Wi-Fi needs to get fired. But I will tell you, burnout. Some of the examples that I've seen of burnout, you know, have really, really ruined some really, really, good people, even in jobs that they like. So I'll go back to like my point about taking on more than you can necessarily manage or handle. When you do that, even sometimes when you like doing certain things, you're going to be a master of none, and then eventually you may get burnt out. So that's always something that you have to consider. Is even when you do like your job, make sure that you do what you can manage.
But Jay, to your point, even that Drake line is part of that larger hustle culture that's got a lot of people burning out. They feel like, if I'm not always in it, then and I think there's really a balance, right? So like part of preventing burnout, um, like if we're thinking about literally a fire, if you've got a fire that's been set, like, a controlled fire outside, right? That fire burns out if you don't keep putting wood on it. You got to keep adding to the wood because the wood that's already there it's supposed to burn out. The question is, are you adding more wood to that fire? And that wood doesn't necessarily have to be through the work that you're doing. It could be through the people that you're in relationships with. It could be the ways in which your work life actually balances with play and vacation. Like working a place that actually says, um, that says, did you like I've worked with people in the past who when holidays come, they still want to work. Oh, or sis. I feel you because I'm going to be working, but you need to take the day off. You need to recharge, reconnect, relax, lots of You need to do one of those things to make sure that as we go down this road together, you don't become some embers. I need you to remain a fire. I need you to remain a fire because you bring light to this place. You know what I'm saying? And more important than that, your fire is not just important to us. Your fire is important to you because I don't want you homesick because you've been overworked. I don't want you depressed because this is the only place where you're giving your energy. And so understanding that like the process of maintaining a flame is not a single thing, it's several things. Let me bring up some, like we've got some viewers who are commenting. Let me bring these comments up onto the stage. Said exactly, work-life balance is necessary. Got a few others. Hopped in like he never left. That I did because I actually did leave. And then we got a couple more. Dr. Sean White calls it hustle and frenzy culture of capitalism. We've got to find our hustle and flow. All right, I see. Just don't be whooping no. Sorry. And then we've got how often should you check in with yourself to know if you need a break? This is an excellent question, Brother Talib. What's your answer to that, Jay? How often should you check in with yourself to know if you need a break?
I think one of the things you have to do, I think the first thing is you have to know yourself. So you have to listen to your body, listen to your mind. If your thoughts are racing, you can't sleep, you probably need a break. Probably need to take a mental health day or take some of those vacation days that you've been building up or book a trip where you leave your phone behind and all of that. You really, you have to listen to your mind, listen to your body. There are times where your body's exhausted. It's just like, I'm sure LeBron James, if he's the guy plays basketball all the time, right? But now that he's older, sometimes he takes a game off, and I know he gets a lot of flack for that. Like, you need to play all 82 games. But he realizes at 38, in order to keep playing and in order to be able to play throughout the playoffs, he needs to let his body rest. He's listening to his body. His body's saying, look, you played, 3 games back to back to back. You need to rest. You played, 42 minutes a game. You need a rest. Maybe at 25, he didn't need that rest, but at 38, he needs it. So I think we have to kind of do load management with ourselves. Like, first of all, we have to sometimes say to ourselves, all right, I got to work at 9 a.m. It's 7 p.m. 7:30, I'm going home. I'm not going to sit here until 11 and then drive home. 7, I'm going home so I can be home, at 8 o'clock so I can tuck my son or my daughter into bed or so I can kiss my spouse and, at least have a little bite to eat and talk to my spouse. You need to be able to do that because if you don't have, like people say, work-life balance, part of that is, maintaining the relationships and the things in your life that are really important. So again, I think sometimes you have to put limits on yourself. You're like, oh man, if I do one more, I'll be able to, I'll be in a better place. Sometimes you have to listen to your mind, listen to your body. Your body's telling you, I can't do anymore. I'm going to shut down on you. You need to recognize when those moments are coming.
I think to piggyback on Jay's point, I would say it depends on the work you do. Like, I think both of us are describing a marathon strategy, but you actually might have a job that requires a sprint, that you actually need to do a whole bunch of work and then take a longer break. So thinking about like the kind of work life you actually want, that's going to determine where you're going to choose to work or what kind of business you're going to create or what products you're going to be selling. Do you want a seasonal business or be in a seasonal business, or do you want to be in something that's going to allow you to take the whole summer off? I literally know people who became teachers not because they love children, but because they wanted the summers off. That's the whole reason why they became K through 12 educators. And on one level, it's easy to judge that person, but it's also really valuable to know they appreciate them federal holidays, they appreciate those 3-day weekends, and they appreciate a summer off. So thinking about the kind of work that you want to do based on the kind of life you want to live. There's lots of people also who have jobs that are just jobs where they just go in, do a thing, and leave work at the office. There are people like me who um, I'm in the office to do work, but I got a home office too because I want to be able to work at home. That's the kind of life I want to live. Um, so I think checking in with yourself, but also deciding if the path that you're on is really the best path for you. We got another comment here. Says Dr. King was 39 when he passed away, when he was murdered. Many don't mention he aged significantly at such a young age. Your body and your mind will tell you they need to rest. Often we don't listen. Big facts. Big facts. Um, you wanted to chime in, Jay?
No, I mean, I would agree with that. I think Dr. King, having read a couple of biographies, I don't know how much he aged, but I can say he definitely, he gained a lot of weight. And that was because he loved food and he's a Southern man. But I agree, the weight of that movement, I'm sure was a lot for him. But I agree 100% with you about, sometimes, there are some people who need more rest than others. You have to know yourself. There are some of us who don't need a lot of R&R. Like we can actually go a little longer than most people. There are others of us. I remember, I know I keep talking about sports, but um, Michael Phelps would swim 40 hours a week. Like he literally spent 40 hours a week in the pool. Um, I don't think that there are many other human beings who could train like that. But Michael Phelps, again, knew his body, knew his mind, knew what he could do. Um,
But was
but
also in a sprint. He was also in a sprint because he had a career that didn't have a long life to it.
right,
So Chloe, I really appreciate your point because like we don't have to make it about Dr. King. We could talk about presidents, right?
yeah,
How drastically 4 years or 8 years has aged all of them except for the Cheeto. Like this idea that they all get so much older, so much grayer because of the stress of the job. But again, those are again sprint-based jobs. Like they got to hurry up and do a whole lot in a short period of time versus building a career. And I think that one of the other things that we never talk about when it comes to thinking about careers, we started to touch on this a little bit on the last episode where we started talking about having bank accounts, this idea of preparing for a day when you don't work anymore. And I wonder how many of the people that are really involved, deeply involved in kind of hustle culture to hurry up and get it and make all the, like how much of that is that they're actually storing it away for a day when they either won't work or they can't work. Like if it's again like that's that marathon approach where you're going to be able to you got to be able to endure for a long period of time, but that race is going to end at some point. And what are you doing right now to actually prepare for the day where you don't race no more? For me, that's the biggest um, problem with hustle culture, that a lot of people that I know at least are hustling a lot, having multiple jobs, multiple streams of income that even still are just providing for the life they're living right now. And I think it's important to enjoy the fruits of your labor, to be able to, like you said, go on those trips or buy those clothes. But what are you also putting aside for a day when you actually are burned out, when you really are the embers and you're looking back on a career filled with fire? What kind of, how are you prioritizing your financial health, not just your physical health, your emotional health, but your financial health to ensure that you're going to be in a position to either mostly maintain the lifestyle that you become accustomed to, or maybe have it diminish somewhat, but not have worked your whole life to struggle as an elder.
right.
We got a couple more comments. I'll come back to you. So we got Tyler said that's a great point. I'm sure he was talking about your point, Jay. and
I
then
don't.
said his career was very short, talking about Dr. King.
I think he was talking about
Oh, Michael Phelps?
Michael Phelps.
Ah.
But at any rate, one of the things that you were saying that made me think of something. You're right about the financial health, but I was thinking about some of my dad's colleagues. There was one guy who, I mean, he was in his he was pretty much like in his 80s or something like that, and he would not retire. And finally, like my dad, who was his, superior, was like, you got to stop. You need to retire. And he was like, okay, but can I still have an office? And so, reluctantly, my dad kind of relented and was like, all right, you can still have an office. And this guy died on the train on his way into work because he couldn't let go. So one of the things that you have to do when you are taking that time to care for yourself is finding other interests so that one day you actually can stop working. There's some of us who are so, talk about hustle culture, we can't let go of it. And then, we literally work ourselves to death, or we work, until we're 85, 90 years old, because we realize once we stop working, we built our identity around our jobs and around our professions, and we haven't found a way how to transition out of it. So I think that's also an important part of this is some people literally their whole life becomes work, and then they can't live without it, and then they don't know how to retire. They don't know how to walk away. This happens, again, another sports metaphor. Well, I guess it's not a metaphor, analogy, I guess. Boxers. There are those boxers, and you and I, Mozzie, have we share fight footage, and there's Roy Jones, who was, at least for about 8 years, was the greatest boxer I've ever seen with my own eyes. He was phenomenal, but he boxed another 15 years after his prime and was getting knocked out by journeymen. And we've seen that over and over and over again because guys have built their identity around being a fighter, and they can't let go. And that's how these guys end up with slurs, and they're not, in good health, and then they live shorter lives. And there are some really tragic boxing stories that I could go into. But, part of this is you have to also find other interests, find a way to walk away, from your profession, not only just financially, but just emotionally, finding it within yourself to say, I am, I'm a doctor, lawyer, garbage man, whatever it is. And that's not the defining characteristic of who I am. And so when I'm 75, I've saved up this little pot of gold, and I'm going to walk away, and I'm going to become a fisherman, or I'm going to become a skier. I don't know what, but this isn't the defining, or I'm just going to be a grandpa. This isn't the only thing that defines who I am.
So you're going to be talking smack about me on my own show? All right, so we got another comment from Chloe, and even though Talib was actually talking about Michael Phelps, her point is still valid. Said, agree, Talib. And I mean, there's a lot of factors to Dr. King's legacy, but even with President Obama, we noticed some callings take a toll. Regardless of passion, we've got to take care of ourselves, even if we're called to do what it is that we do. So I'm like double tapping on Chloe's comment, mostly because I was literally just telling someone this in an interview, like, who asked me, how long have I been at Words Beats in Life? And I was like, I'm a co-founder. I've been here for 21 years. And so she was like, so do you still love it, or are you still excited by it? And I was like, well, yeah, but my experience is different in this organization than everybody else, because I literally hired everybody. So everyone that I work with every day, from my board to my staff to my interns, are people that I selected to want to work with. So I was like, that's not necessarily true for everybody. But I did say, the other thing I said was that if there are 75 people that work here, I feel like, and I could be wrong, there's like 5 people that are here for a paycheck. Everybody else is here for mission, that they believe in it. And I know that not just because of interviews or even because of them telling me things, but when people got better opportunities and took other jobs, they didn't leave. They stayed involved and invested and committed to the work that we're doing. And I feel like there's some value in thinking about work in part as mission. And so, to some degree, I agree with you, Jay. But I also know, if I'm being transparent with myself, on my trip to Jamaica, where I proposed to my now wife, I was writing grants that weekend because I had to get them grants turned in. There wasn't someone for me to turn that work over to. And I don't necessarily look forward to the day where this isn't my purpose. Like I'm like, to be 1,000% transparent, I've always seen this as like not having a retirement plan, not having an after words beats in life vision, because I'm gonna be that person on the train that you were talking about coming to your father's office. Even if I was a board member, I'm not here for a check. I'm not here because it's a job. I'm here because every single day of my life, I'm able to work with people that I love to realize purpose. And you're probably right. Should my wife and I have children and grandchildren and all that good stuff, I'm sure that other things will take precedent. But for now, I'm actually content with the idea that working with people I love to make a difference in the world is all I want to do. It is, and not to sacrifice myself, not to give up my life or martyr myself for this work, but to be a co-worker, a collaborator, a co-organizer, and a co-visionary with other people. And I'm not saying that's not what you said, so you don't got to defend your position. I'm just saying, like, there has to be some people who are also thinking about the ways that they engage in the world as a purpose and not just a position or a job.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I'm not defending my position, because, like, as you stated, that wasn't what I said. But what I will say is that I think at a certain point, still, I maintain that there are times in life where you have to be willing to step down and let others lead. I mean, we're seeing that right now. Someone like Chuck Grassley, or looking at someone like Dianne Feinstein. You know what I mean? I think about like Dianne Feinstein. She's like 89. Like, I think at a certain point, it's okay to mentor other people, and that can be part of your contribution to the world. Is to say, okay, I've done this for a long time. Let me groom someone else. I bet you Nancy Pelosi had a difficult time. I'm just thinking in terms of politics, and some of the older octogenarians out there in our political world on both sides of the aisle. I'm sure Nancy Pelosi, who has been, either Speaker of the House or Minority Leader for 2 decades or 2.5 decades now, it was hard for her to walk away and say, you know what, Hakeem Jeffries, you've got 25 years before you're my age. Like, it's time for me. I don't have to die in my office. I can actually spend time with my ailing husband, and let me pass you the gavel, the mic, and all of that. I think that's also how we contribute and keep things going, is when you don't always think that in order for this work to be done, I have to be doing it. I get, when you've contributed that much for a really long time, like, the question is, when do you ever get the opportunity to step away and say, mission accomplished? Not that the world has been changed or all the challenges are gone away, but my mission, I've put 60 or 70 years into this. My mission is accomplished because I did what I could and I prepared someone else. Now I can be grandpa, or now I can be, fisherman, or now I can be something else. And you know, again, I also will say this from, you know, in academia, from a little bit of a selfish standpoint, there's a backlog of young PhDs that can't get jobs because there's some 85 or 90-year-old tenured professor that thinks this is his life's work and won't step down, and you can't fire them. So for me, you know, this also means, hey, let's give some other people opportunities as well.
You know, it's funny. I was watching this person doing I think it was like a HR training on Instagram, and he was talking about he was playing out a scenario where a white man, was complaining about losing his job to a woman or a person of color. And the facilitator was a white man, and he asked the question. He said, "What makes you think that's your job? It doesn't belong to you." And so this idea that those elders are in the way of young PhDs assumes that um, assumes both ways. One, that that's a job that should be yours, as opposed to no, that's that person's job. And there are other places that you might have to be able to use your expertise other than the institutions that you were trained to work in. First, but second, you know, what's really funny is that I have only personally, we're going to get to the innovation part of, because we've been talking about burnout and talking about staffing and kind of things like that. I have only come around really since COVID to thinking about the idea of words, beats, and life outliving me. I've never been invested in that idea, not because I selfishly want to be the executive forever, but because I actually don't think that the function of institutions is to be perpetual. Even if the problems are perpetual, it doesn't mean the organization has a right to continue to exist. And it's only by sharing that and listening to people be like, well, yeah, Mazi, it doesn't have a right to exist, but wouldn't it actually be harder for someone else to start it later? Yes, was my answer. So I've come around to this idea of institution building. But I've always thought that the real beauty of founder led organizations is not that they necessarily outlive the founder, but that people come in, have good experiences and maybe some bad experiences, learn from them, and go other places. That the true contribution of the work is the people that are served and the people that are doing the service growing through that experience. One of the people I'm most proud of, having worked here, started as an intern, then became the very first development person I hired. And then he left to go become the director of development someplace else. And now is the executive director of that place. Like, that's amazing. And so around innovation, I think that part of the challenge of leadership is to not just be thinking about how people can inherit the work or inherit the organization or be selected, but how it is that we build institutions that allow people to chase their own dreams, to build their own things, whether that's an LLC or a C corporate, whatever the thing you want to build doesn't necessarily have to be the place that you work, but the place you work has to be a place that you grow. If the place that you work is not invested in your growth and development, it is literally stealing your time in exchange for money. That this idea of being invested in the development of people, not for the company's sake, but for the sake of the people themselves, has to be a part of the way we think about preventing burnout by starting new fires, by investing in more people in ways that are actually not just transformational for the company or the clients, but transformational for the people doing the work. So many people, especially in like the space of social work, get burnt out taking on other people's challenges, helping them be able to work through them. Teachers, you know, people that work in the nonprofits, whatever the place is, so many people take on the burdens of others and are burned out in that process. And so it feels like one of the responsibilities of managers or leaders or founders is to be thinking about that constantly and to ensure that you become the second best advocate for the people that are in your organization, because they got to be the best advocate. They have to be able to know their own value and have the ability to advocate for their own time, for their own recharge, for their own development. And so that's kind of my response. And the need to be thinking about how organizations, how leaders are innovating to not just prevent burnout, but to recognize early onset challenges for people, to be able to encourage them to take that time for themselves, to be invested in themselves.
Yeah, so I guess going back one step, um, I don't think that young scholars think that they are entitled to someone's job. Number one, I think first of all it is an opportunity. Like they're not going to move you into that job. You're going to have to compete with a whole host of other people in order to get that job. But there are a limited amount of jobs out there, and academia is one of those fields where you can stay in until you die on the train. And I think what kind of innovative scholarship are we leaving on the cutting room floor because those people don't get access to institutional support because somebody that's 95 years old who hasn't, they don't have any new ideas or contributions that they can, really make, versus somebody who's got some new ideas, new ways of looking at things. And speaking of innovation, I think that some 25, 30-year-old scholar probably has, well, 25 is a little young, 28, 30-year-old scholar probably has a lot that they can contribute, in terms of thinking about things in innovative ways, understanding technology, looking at things completely differently than someone who's been answering these questions for 65, 70 years. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. That person has earned their space and they've held that space for quite a long time. And I think it's okay, to allow for other people to take that space, especially I think in that person's career, they should be looking to mentor other people, um, which is a big part of it. But as for the other things that you were saying,
No. Let's stick there because I want to respond. I want to respond, bro. Because I so per usual, we almost never disagree. It's always about the accents of emphasis. The accents of emphasis. And so, like, where I disagree with you is that there should be a whole generation of scholars who are thinking about how to use their PhD outside of an institution, whether that's
oh,
through a publication, whether that's through a media company, whether that's through creating their own lane. And so, this idea that and I know this is not what you're saying, so let's be clear, you don't need to respond to this. They're not owed a job in an institution, but maybe part of their responsibility is to build a different kind of institution. Like, how transformational would it be if there were more and granted, the money is not necessarily great in all cases. How transformational would it be if there were more PhDs in government, more PhDs in K through 12 education, more PhDs in journalism, more PhDs in media making? So instead of talking about a glut of people waiting for a few jobs, why not talk about all the other places that need scholarship, that need people who have expertise beyond what's in a Twitter feed or what's popping on YouTube today, to be able to give some context to help explain? Because this is the thing, like, real, and I'm gonna let you keep talking. There's a whole lot of people that don't really understand, and I'm gonna stop right there, because you be like, understand what? Period. That just don't understand what they're watching, don't understand what they're reading, don't understand what they're learning. And maybe part of the role of PhDs is to take all of that knowledge, all of that writing experience, and take it someplace where it's actually going to be transformational, as opposed to continuing to put it all in an ivory tower where only people who can afford it or willing to go into debt for it can actually access it. Maybe that's the innovation and it's not because that's not happening. Of course that's happening. People are writing books, but I'm saying having that be the thing that people are working towards. I want to use all my knowledge, all my research to actually invest in these other places that need this information.
yeah, no, I agree with that. And as you stated, there are lots of PhDs who are doing that. But there are some that want to teach in the traditional classroom, and they want to have access to things that are very difficult to build on your own. So, for example, if you have a PhD in biology or chemistry, it's kind of hard to uh, build up and get the resources to build a chemistry lab or a biology lab or an engineering lab where There are people out there who are building all kinds of technology and all that now. Yes, you could probably, if you're an engineer, you go work for, Northrop Grumman or, whomever. But in reality, a lot of people want that traditional access that they can have at a university with the resources that a research university can provide. But I definitely see your point that we have to think about more innovative ways to use our expertise. I mean, that's something that I built my career around is I decided I didn't want to be a tenured professor. I just decided, like, when I saw the grind, not that it was any more difficult than what I'm doing now. I don't think it is, actually. But when I saw what they were doing, I was like, I'm not going to enjoy that. Like, I'm going to be bored to tears. I did it for about 6 months, published a paper or two. And I was like, if this is what my career is going to look like for the next 30 years or 40 years, or in the case of some of these 90-year-old professors, 60 years, then I don't, this isn't really what I'm looking for. I wouldn't feel fulfilled. So this goes back to what we were talking about earlier about knowing yourself and knowing what's actually going to have you be fulfilled, and not just thinking about a paycheck. Because sure, I probably make close to what some tenured, I'll probably make around there. But the point is, a lot of tenured professors, end up making a whole lot more than I do right now. But I wouldn't trade my life for theirs at all, because I actually enjoy what I'm doing. And, that's a big part of, this work-life balance is, do you go to work and enjoy what you're doing? Are there innovative ways that you can think about things? And for me, part of it is what you're describing. Like, how can I spread the knowledge that I have or that I'm gaining in some non-traditional ways, for an academic? And I've enjoyed that.
So this is the piece I feel like we're missing, right? Because I think this whole idea of talking about enjoyment versus, like, it took everything within me to not cut you off when you were talking, to be like, those people are not just wanting that job. They want the security that comes with that job. They want the retirement. They want the tenure track. They want those things. But I didn't say that.
No, but you're right. Yeah.
I kept it to myself. Because one of the things that's happening right now is we're living in what is still the beginning of the gig economy, right? Because the gig economy is supposed to give you some of that. You're doing something. It's really supposed to be giving you more of your time. You can trade some of your time to make some money without needing to commit to being someplace all the time, right? So you could be delivering food sometimes. You could be picking up passengers sometimes. You could be delivering packages. All these things that are the gig economy. But one of the things that's happening right now in the gig economy is people are saying, okay, that freedom is great, but you know what's even greater? Being a part of a union so you can't fire me. You know what's even greater? Being a part of a union so I can access healthcare. And so one of the things that's happening is that people are saying, yes, I want freedom, but I also want the benefits that come with being locked down in a job. And I'm not arguing they're right or wrong. I'm just saying that that's one of the things that's happening globally, that all these people who've gained new access to income through want the stability that a regular job brings and are fighting legal battles to be able to do that. But my question is, beyond kind of private sector companies that are generating money to promote innovation, what are the other kinds of innovations that we're witnesses to or participating in that are really valuable? Like, one of the things I've witnessed, for my entire career is people reimagining hierarchy, right? Saying that that people are very interested in responsibility and, opportunities for pay increases, but not wanting to have people feel like there's people above them or that there's people below them. And so thinking about what is flat organizing that has differentiated responsibilities and compensation, but a feeling of connectedness and community look like in a business. That's part of what I'm the conversations I'm engaging in with people from this new generation entering work, the people that are 20 to 30 years old, that they want to talk about how to reimagine the structures that they're participating in, contributing to, and benefiting from. And I think it's a really healthy conversation, especially for young organizations. And I think anything less is a young. The future that the leadership contribute, but also benefit. This idea of benefits is, I think, pivotal as we think about, the role of leadership, the role of organizing, of organizations, to kind of the future of this work, the future of this field.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely correct. Looking at these things innovatively, this is why, again, young people or younger people can be an asset sometimes, not always, but there are times where having young people around and people who are thinking about, structures and new ways and how can we use what's been established but reimagine it. I think that's a really positive thing, that will move a lot of organizations forward. And when you're just someone who thinks, okay, I'm going to do, like, the person who comes into Words Beats in Life, if Words Beats in Life is an institution that transcends your lifetime, the people that come in hopefully will understand and learn from your example, but will also be like, how do we reimagine the work we're doing? Because that's what I know you do. That's one of the things that I respect so much about the job you've done over the years is, like, I know you're always rethinking things. You're not like, okay, this worked for us last year, so we're going to do the exact same thing this year. And then the exact same thing the following year. You're always like, is there a way we can improve upon this? Can I convene other leaders in this space so that we can all think about how we're going to, better serve the communities that we do serve? And I think that's really an important thing that will maintain these institutions, whether it's in the nonprofit space or some other kind of space, is when someone is always thinking of new ways, not just leaning on the way you've done it forever. Those are the ones that don't, the institutions that don't survive for a really long time.
Well, Jay, I definitely have appreciated this conversation. I feel super invigorated. I got to tell you, this is one of the highlights of my week, coming to talk to you, not just because you're one of the smartest people that I know, but really because you're always going to challenge the viewer or the reader. You're always challenging people on Twitter. That you're not a person that just lets people rest with their ideas. You want to challenge those understandings, even if you agree with them. And I think that's really important to the question earlier about mentorship, but also friendships, having people in your life that aren't just going to tell you that you're great, but also be like, yeah, you're pretty good, but here's some things worth considering. And I would say that's one of the other ways to prevent burnout, is to make sure that the people in your circle inspire you, that they motivate you, that they challenge you, and that they encourage you to be innovative. Jay, I want to thank you for joining us again this Sunday.
You already.
I cut you off too early. You said what?
I said thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, everybody. That's another episode of No New Leaders. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Feel free to leave a comment or share this with someone in your circle. My name is Mazi Mutafa, Executive Director of Words Beats in Life. Peace, y'all.